I had just left the cemetery in Pittsburgh when my phone buzzed. The man on the line gasped that if I wanted to live, I had to come to his office alone. I had not even finished crying for my dad. Just 1 hour after the funeral, I was told my life hung by a thread. When I opened that door, I found the one person who should not have been there. I thought the waiting secret would destroy my brother, but it destroyed me first. My name is Abigail Price. I am 34 years old, by trade and by nature. I am a senior fraud investigator at the North River Integrity Group. My job is to look at a perfectly constructed column of numbers, spot the one digit that does not belong, and pull the thread until the entire suit unravels. I deal in logic. I deal in paper trails and digital footprints. I do not deal in messy emotions or illogical outcomes. Yet, as I stood there in the mud of the Homewood Cemetery, logic had abandoned me. The rain in Pittsburgh does not wash things clean. It just makes the grime slicker. It was falling in sheets, a cold and relentless downpour that soaked through the black wool of my coat and chilled the marrow of my bones. The service was over. The few mourners who had braved the weather had already retreated to their cars, eager to get back to the warmth of the living. I remained. I stood alone before the fresh mound of earth that covered Thomas Price, my father. I should have left 20 minutes ago. My shoes were ruining in the slush, and my hair was plastered to my forehead, but I could not move. I felt incomplete. It was not just the grief, which felt like a heavy stone swallowed whole. It was the lack of finality. We had not said goodbye, not really, and the one person who should have been standing next to me, my younger brother Bryce, was nowhere to be seen. Bryce had been missing for the entire week our father lay dying in the ICU. He had not answered his phone. He had not replied to texts. And today, on the day we put our father into the ground, his chair in the front row had remained empty. It was a humiliation Dad did not deserve, and it was a cowardice I did not expect, even from Bryce. My phone buzzed against my hip. It was a jarring, mechanical vibration that cut through the sound of the rain hitting the grave markers. I pulled it out, wiping the screen with a trembling thumb. The number was stored in my contacts, but I stared at it for a moment, confused. Elliot Crane. He was my father's personal attorney. He had been at the service earlier, standing in the back, looking pale and shaken. He had left before the first shovel of dirt was thrown. Why was he calling me now? I swiped right and brought the phone to my ear. "Elliot," I said, my voice cracking from disuse. "I am still at the cemetery. If this is about the reading of the will, surely it can wait until—" "Abigail." His voice stopped me cold. It was not the measured, baritone voice of the confident lawyer I had known since I was a child. It was a wheeze, a desperate, terrified whisper. He sounded like a man who had been running for miles. "Listen to me closely," Elliot said. "Do not ask questions. Do not interrupt. If you want to live, you need to come to my office, right now." The professional part of my brain, the part that analyzed threats for a living, kicked into gear. "Elliot, what is going on? You are scaring me." "Come alone," he hissed. The signal crackled with static. "Did anyone see you leave? Are you alone right now?" "I am at the grave. Yes, I am alone. Elliot, take a breath. Tell me what is happening." "There is no time," he snapped. Then his voice dropped, trembling so hard I could barely make out the words. "Do not tell anyone where you are going, especially not your brother. Do not tell Bryce." I frowned, the rain dripping off the end of my nose. Bryce, I have not seen Bryce in 10 days. He did not even show up to the funeral. "Good. Keep it that way. He is compromised. Everything is compromised." There was a sound in the background on his end, a heavy thud, like a door slamming shut, or a book falling. Elliot gasped. "Abigail, please, just get here. And remember the blue heron." The line went dead. I stared at the phone screen as it turned black. The rain hammered against the back of my hand. "Remember the blue heron." A chill that had nothing to do with the weather sprinted up my spine. That phrase, it was nonsensical to anyone else, but to me, it was a latch on a hidden door. It was a reference to a camping trip from 20 years ago. A secret code Dad used to use when he wanted to talk about something strictly between us. Why did Elliot Crane know it? And why use it now? Moments after my father was buried, I shoved the phone into my pocket and turned back to the car. My movements were no longer sluggish with grief. Adrenaline had flooded my system. Sharp and metallic, I got into my sedan, the leather seats freezing against my legs, and jammed the key into the ignition. The engine roared to life. I did not look back at the grave. Dad was gone. But whatever had killed him, whatever mess he had left behind, was apparently very much alive. I merged onto the highway, heading toward downtown Pittsburgh. The wipers slashed back and forth, fighting a losing battle against the deluge. The city looked like a watercolor painting left out in the rain, gray smears of concrete and steel bleeding into the charcoal sky. My mind raced. I began to replay the last few weeks. The investigation instincts I used at North River Integrity Group took over. I started categorizing data points, looking for the anomaly. Dad's death. On paper, it was cardiac arrest, a massive heart attack in his sleep. But the medical examiner's report had been brief, too brief. Dad had a heart condition. Yes, but it was managed. He was on medication. I had seen his chart 3 weeks ago when I took him for his checkup. The cardiologist had used the word stable. He had said Dad had another 10 years. Easy. Then there were the questions. In the month before he died, Dad had been different. He would call me late at night, his voice thick with scotch, asking things that felt philosophical but now felt like warnings. Abigail. He had asked one Tuesday night, "If someone you love cuts your throat, do you blame the knife or the hand, Abigail?" He had said 2 days later, "If a family member betrays you, can you still call them blood?" I had dismissed it as melancholy. I had thought he was just getting old and sentimental. Now, with Elliot's terrified voice echoing in my ear, those questions felt like a confession he never got to finish. I checked my rearview mirror. A black SUV was 3 car lengths behind me. It was a generic model. Dark windows, mud on the license plate obscuring the numbers. I did not think much of it at first. It was rush hour in the rain. Everyone was driving aggressive and close. I took the exit for the Liberty Bridge. The SUV took the exit too. I changed lanes, sliding into the right lane to let a truck pass. The SUV changed lanes with me, keeping the exact same distance. My grip tightened on the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. I knew this dance. I had performed surveillance myself. 3 turns. That is the rule. If a car is still behind you after 3 distinct deviations from the main route, it is not a coincidence. It is a tale. I took a sharp right onto a side street that led through the Strip District. It was not the way to Elliot's office. I watched the mirror. The SUV turned right. 1. I drove 2 blocks and took a sudden left, cutting through an alleyway that was barely wide enough for my sedan. The SUV followed, its headlights cutting through the gloom like predator eyes. 2. My heart hammered against my ribs. Do not tell Bryce. He is compromised. Was that Bryce behind me? Or was it the people Elliot was afraid of? I floored the gas pedal, the tires spinning on the wet asphalt before catching traction. I wove through the industrial district, taking a chaotic route that made no logical sense. Right, left, right again. I ran a yellow light that turned red mid-intersection. I checked the mirror. The street behind me was empty. 3. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. But the tension did not leave my shoulders. I was not safe. I was just alone for the moment. I arrived at the building where Elliot Crane rented his office space 15 minutes later. It was a mid-rise structure from the 1920s. Gargoyles perched on the eaves, weeping rainwater onto the sidewalk. The ground floor was a closed bank branch. Elliot's firm took up the entire 4th floor. I parked the car in a loading zone. I did not care about the ticket. I looked up at the 4th floor. The windows were dark. The office should have been closed for the day out of respect for my father. But Elliot had called me there. I expected to see a light, a lamp, something. Instead, I saw total darkness. Wait, in the 3rd window from the left, a shadow moved. It was subtle, just a shift in the density of the blackness behind the glass. Someone was standing right against the window, looking down at the street, looking at me. I shivered. "Come alone." I stepped out of the car. The wind whipped my hair across my face, stinging my eyes. I pushed through the heavy glass doors of the lobby. It was empty. The security guard's desk was vacant. A half-eaten sandwich sitting on a napkin. That was wrong. There was always a guard here. I walked to the elevators. My heels clicked loudly on the marble floor, the sound echoing like gunshots in the quiet space. I pressed the button for the 4th floor. The elevator machinery groaned. I watched the digital display above the doors. The numbers lit up in red. 1, 2, 3. I took a deep breath. Preparing myself, I prepared my face. I locked away the grief and the fear, and I put on the mask of Abigail Price, the investigator, the woman who could stare down a CEO caught embezzling millions without blinking. I expected Elliot Crane to be waiting for me. I expected him to be sweating, holding a file, maybe holding a gun. I expected answers about the Blue Heron. I expected to be told why my father died. The elevator dinged. It was a cheerful sound that had no business being in a moment like this. The metal doors slid open. I took a step forward, ready to speak Elliot's name. The word died in my throat. The reception area of the law firm was dim, lit only by the emergency exit signs and the gray light filtering in from the windows. But I could see the figure standing in the center of the room clearly enough. It was not Elliot Crane. The man standing there wore a black suit that cost more than my car. His hair was perfectly styled, despite the weather outside. He was leaning against the receptionist's desk, examining his fingernails with a look of utter boredom. He looked up as the elevator doors opened. His eyes, the same shade of hazel as mine, the same shade as our father's, locked onto me. There was no grief in them. There was no redness from crying. There was only a cold, calculating emptiness. "Hello, sister," he said. It was Bryce, the brother who had vanished while our father died, the brother who had skipped the funeral, the brother Elliot had explicitly told me not to trust. He was not hiding. He was not running. He was waiting for me. The metal doors of the elevator began to close behind my brother, but I shoved my hand into the gap. The sensors triggered, and the doors bounced back open with a rattle. Bryce did not flinch. He did not look surprised to see me, nor did he look guilty. He stood there in the reception area, his posture rigid, his hands buried deep in the pockets of his charcoal suit. He looked immaculate, while I was dripping wet, with mud spattered on my ankles and my makeup likely running down my cheeks. Bryce looked like he had just stepped out of a magazine photo shoot. His hair was gelled back perfectly. His tie was a knot of precise geometric symmetry. But his face was a mask of death. Beneath the tan he usually maintained, his skin was the color of old parchment. There were dark, bruised circles under his eyes that no amount of sleep could fix in a single night. He looked at me, but he did not see me. He looked through me, as if I were a ghost, and he was the one still among the living. "Bryce," I said. My voice was low, trapped somewhere between a scream and a whisper. "Where have you been? Where were you?" He stepped around me. He moved with a fluid, mechanical grace, heading toward the elevator I had just exited. He was leaving. He was going to walk right past me without a single word of explanation. I grabbed his arm. The fabric of his suit was expensive, fine wool that felt soft under my fingers. But the arm beneath it was rock hard. Tension radiated off him in waves. He stopped, but he did not turn his head. He stared straight at the wall, specifically at a framed diploma hanging crookedly near the reception desk. "Dad is in the ground." "Bryce," I said, my grip tightening. "We just buried him. Mom was looking for you. Everyone was looking for you. You disappeared for a week while he was dying, and then you skipped the funeral. Do you have any idea what you have done?" Bryce finally turned his head. His eyes were cold, devoid of the warmth I remembered from our childhood. He looked at my hand on his arm with distaste, as if a stranger were accosting him in the street. "Let go, Abigail," he said. "Tell me where you were," I demanded. "Tell me why you are here, at his lawyer's office, an hour after the service. Did you come for the money? Is that it?" You could not wait until the dirt settled to come and see what he left you. A flicker of emotion crossed his face. It happened so fast I almost missed it. It was pain, sharp, agonizing pain, but he crushed it instantly, smoothing his expression back into that terrifying blankness. "You do not understand," he said. His voice was flat, a monotone drone that frightened me more than shouting would have. "You do not know what is happening. You do not know anything." "Then tell me," I challenged him. He leaned in close. I could smell him. He did not smell like rain or grief. He smelled of peppermint and something sterile, like rubbing alcohol. "Stay out of it, Abigail," he whispered. "Go home. Lock your doors. Forget you saw me here. Forget you have a brother." He yanked his arm free from my grip. The force of it made me stumble back a step. Before I could regain my balance, he stepped into the elevator. He hit the button for the lobby. He did not look at me again as the doors slid shut, sealing him away, leaving me alone in the dim reception area. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic rhythm that made my hands shake. I wanted to chase him. I wanted to drag him back and force the truth out of him. But then I remembered Elliot. "If you want to live, come to my office." I turned toward the heavy oak door that led to the inner sanctum of the firm. It was slightly ajar. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The air in Elliot Crane's private office was thick and stagnant. It smelled of dust, old paper, and coffee that had been sitting out long enough to turn sour. The room was usually a testament to order and prestige: mahogany bookshelves, leather chairs, a view of the city skyline. Now, it looked like a bunker. Blinds were drawn tight against the windows, blocking out the gray afternoon light. The only illumination came from a single brass desk lamp that cast long, distorted shadows across the room. Files were scattered everywhere, not neatly stacked, but thrown across the floor, the sofa, and the desk, as if someone had been searching for something in a panic. Elliot sat behind his massive desk. He did not look like the man who had called me 10 minutes ago. On the phone, he had been hysterical. Now, he sat with his hands clasped on top of a legal pad, his shoulders hunched. He looked like a man who had just run a marathon and lost. His tie was loosened, his top button undone, and a sheen of sweat glistened on his high forehead despite the chill in the room. "Close the door," he said. I did as he asked, the latch clicking loudly in the silence. I walked toward the desk, my heels sinking into the plush oriental rug. "Elliot," I said, keeping my voice steady. "I saw Bryce. He was just leaving. What is going on? Why was he here?" Elliot did not answer immediately. He picked up a ceramic mug, looked into the black liquid inside, and put it back down without drinking. He seemed to be choosing his words with agonizing care. "Bryce has his own matters to attend to," Elliot said. His tone was bizarrely formal. It was his lawyer voice, the one he used in courtrooms, but it sounded hollow here, like an actor reading lines he did not believe. "We are not here to discuss your brother. We are here to discuss the estate." I stopped in front of the desk. "The estate. You told me on the phone that my life was in danger. You told me not to tell Bryce. You sounded like you were being murdered, and now you want to talk about the estate." Elliot flinched. His eyes darted around the room. He looked at the ceiling fan. He looked at the bookshelf. He looked at the thermostat on the wall. He looked everywhere except at me. "I may have been overdramatic," he said, forcing a tight, grim smile that did not reach his eyes. "Grief does strange things to us all. Abigail, your father's passing has hit me harder than I expected. I apologize if I frightened you." "You asked me if I remembered the Blue Heron," I said. The reaction was instant. Elliot's spine snapped straight. His hands clenched on the desk so hard his knuckles turned the color of bone. He did not speak. He just stared at me, his eyes wide and pleading. He moved his head a fraction of an inch to the right, gesturing with his eyes toward the corner of the ceiling where a smoke detector blinked a steady red light. My stomach dropped. He was being watched, or listened to, or both. "The Blue Heron," I repeated, testing the waters, watching his face. "You said it was a matter of life and death. I was referring to the Blue Heron Lodge, Elliot said loudly. Too loudly. He was performing for an invisible audience. Your father's property up north. We need to discuss the transfer of the title. It requires your immediate attention. That is why I called. He was lying. I could see the pulse jumping in his neck. He was terrified. Is that all? I asked, playing along. Just the lodge? And the power of attorney, Elliot said. He began to shuffle the papers on his desk, his hands shaking so badly he nearly knocked over a stapler. There are some irregularities with the signatures from his final days. I need you to sign a temporary authorization just to keep the accounts frozen until we can sort through the probate. He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a pen. He did not hand it to me. He slid it across the polished mahogany surface. The pen spun slowly as it moved toward me, making a low hissing sound against the wood. It was a heavy black fountain pen with silver accents. It looked expensive. The kind of gift a client gives a lawyer after a big win. But as it stopped near my hand, I noticed something odd. It looked slick. The light from the lamp caught a strange sheen on the barrel, as if it had been wiped down with oil. Use this, Elliot said. His eyes locked onto mine. The intensity in his gaze was searing. Please, use this pen. It is the one your father used. It is significant. I reached out and picked it up. It was shockingly cold. Not just room temperature cool, but ice cold, as if it had been stored in a freezer, and it was heavy. Much heavier than a pen should be. The balance was off. It felt dense, solid, like a weapon disguised as a writing instrument. Sign where? I asked. Anywhere, Elliot said. Just take it. Keep it. As a memento. I looked at him, confused. He was giving me the pen. He was not asking me to sign anything. He was pushing the pen on me. Then I saw it. Elliot's arm had knocked aside a stack of manila folders when he slid the pen over. Underneath the pile, half hidden by a legal pad, was a white envelope. It was thick, sealed with red wax. On the front, in handwriting I recognized instantly as my father's, were the words, "Open 1 hour after funeral." My breath hitched. I reached for it. Is that... Elliot's hand shot out like a cobra. He slammed his palm down on top of the envelope, covering it completely. His face went gray. He looked at the corner of the room again, terror flooding his expression. That is nothing, he said quickly. His voice rose an octave. Old files? Irrelevant? Attorney-client privilege? He grabbed the envelope and shoved it into the top drawer of his desk, locking it with a key he pulled from his pocket. The sound of the lock clicking was final. You should go. Abigail, Elliot said. He stood up abruptly. I have another meeting. I cannot help you today. We will reschedule. Go home. Be with your family. But you called me, I protested, gripping the heavy pen in my hand. You said... Forget what I said, he snapped. He walked around the desk and grabbed my elbow, steering me toward the door. His grip was weak, his hands clammy. I was confused. I am an old man, and I am confused. Just go, please, for your own sake. Leave. He practically pushed me into the hallway. Elliot. Goodbye, Ms. Price, he said loudly. Then, in a whisper barely audible over the hum of the building's HVAC system, he added, Run. The door slammed in my face. I heard the lock turn. I stood there in the hallway, the heavy black pen clutched in my fist. The silence of the office building was oppressive. The carpet runner stretched out in both directions, empty and dim. I felt exposed. I felt like a target. I turned to leave, walking quickly toward the elevators. The adrenaline was starting to fade, replaced by a cold dread. What had just happened? Why was Bryce there? What was in the envelope? And why was Elliot Crane? A man who had stared down federal prosecutors, shaking like a leaf. Ding. The sound came from behind me. I spun around. The elevator I had just come up in, the one Bryce had gone down in, was opening. I held my breath, waiting. I expected to see the men Elliot was afraid of. I expected to see police. I expected to see Bryce coming back to finish whatever he had started. The doors slid all the way open. The car was empty. There was no one inside. No one in the hallway. Just the empty, illuminated box waiting for a passenger. I felt a prickle on the back of my neck. Someone had called that elevator to this floor, but no one was here to get on, or someone had been on it, and they had gotten off before the doors fully opened. That was impossible. Unless someone was in the stairwell. I did not wait to find out. I scrambled into the elevator, hammering the button for the lobby repeatedly until the doors closed. I rode down in silence, my back pressed against the metal wall, clutching the pen like a lifeline. When I burst out of the building and into the rain, I did not stop running until I was inside my car. I locked the doors. I checked the back seat. Empty. I sat there for a moment, breathing hard, listening to the rain hammer against the roof. I looked down at the pen in my hand. It was just a pen, a heavy, expensive, souvenir pen. Elliot had been losing his mind. That had to be it. He was having a breakdown, but the weight of it bothered me. It was top-heavy. I held the bottom half of the barrel and twisted the cap. It did not come off. I twisted harder. It was stuck. I used the hem of my coat to get a better grip and twisted again. There was a soft click, and the barrel unscrewed. Not at the top where the ink cartridge should be, but in the middle. The pen fell apart in my hands. There was no ink cartridge inside. The interior had been hollowed out. Nestled in the cavity was a small, silver key. It looked like a locker key or a safety deposit box key. Stuffed in beside it, rolled up tightly, was a scrap of yellow legal paper. My hands trembling, I fished the paper out and unrolled it. It was not my father's handwriting. It was Elliot's scrawl, rushed and jagged, as if written in the dark. Do not trust Bryce. Don't trust me. The morning news anchor did not even have the decency to look sad. She wore a bright crimson blazer that clashed violently with the footage playing on the screen behind her, and her voice was practiced, smooth, and utterly detached from the horror she was describing. I sat on the edge of my sofa, a mug of cold tea forgotten in my hands. The television screen showed a blackened, skeletal tooth of a building jutting up into the Pittsburgh sky. Smoke was still pouring from the fourth floor, thick and oily, mixing with the relentless drizzle that had not stopped since the funeral. Breaking news. The banner read, "Fire consumes downtown law office. 1 fatality confirmed." The blaze is believed to have started shortly after 7 o'clock last night, the anchor said. Firefighters battled the flames for over 4 hours. While the investigation is ongoing, preliminary reports from the fire marshal suggest a catastrophic electrical failure in the server room on the 4th floor. I threw the remote across the room. It hit the wall with a satisfying crack. Electrical failure. It was a lie. It was a lazy, insulting lie. Just last month, my father had been bragging about Elliot's office renovations. He had told me over Sunday dinner that Elliot had spent $50,000 upgrading the wiring and installing a state-of-the-art suppression system because he was paranoid about losing client files. Dad had laughed about it then. Elliot and his doomsday prepping. He had said, "New systems do not just spontaneously combust 6 hours after the owner starts handing out secret keys." I was in my car 5 minutes later. The police had cordoned off 2 city blocks. The air downtown tasted like wet charcoal and melted plastic. It was a smell that stuck to the back of your throat, bitter and carcinogenic. I parked my car in a garage 3 streets away and walked the rest of the distance, keeping my head down, my collar turned up against the wind. A crowd had gathered at the edge of the yellow tape. It was the usual mix of morbid curiosity seekers and displaced office workers wondering if they still had jobs. I pushed my way to the front, flashing my North River identification badge. It was not a police badge, but it looked authoritative enough to get me past the first line of civilians. I stopped when I saw the gurney. 2 paramedics were wheeling it out of the lobby entrance. The body bag was black, shiny with rain, and zipped tight. It looked small. Death always makes people look smaller than they were in life. A beat cop was standing near me, talking to a man in a firefighter's turnout coat. The wind carried their voices right to me. "Identify him yet?" the cop asked. "Crane?" the firefighter grunted, wiping soot from his forehead. "Dental records will have to confirm, but the receptionist said he never left." Found him in the main office, or what was left of it. Poor bastard did not stand a chance. It burned hot in there. I felt the blood drain from my face. Elliot was dead. I had been the last person to see him alive. I had left him there, shaking and terrified, and I had run away. If I had stayed, would I be in a body bag right now? Or could I have saved him? I looked up at the 4th floor. The windows were blown out, leaving gaping black maws that seemed to scream silently at the city. Then I remembered Bryce. Bryce had been there. He had left minutes before I went in. "Forget you saw me here," he had said. "Forget you have a brother." I scanned the crowd, my heart racing. Was he here? Was he watching his handiwork? Or was he the one who had set the spark? The image of my brother's cold, dead eyes in the elevator lobby haunted me. He had looked like a man capable of anything. "Ma'am, you need to step back," an officer said. Stepping into my line of sight, he was young, his face unlined, but his hand rested casually on his belt near his taser. "This is an active crime scene." "I knew him," I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "I was his client. I saw him yesterday." The officer's eyes narrowed. "Yesterday? What time?" I opened my mouth to answer, and then I stopped. Do not trust anyone. Elliot's note had said, "Don't trust me." If the police were already calling this an electrical fire, then the narrative had already been written. Anything I said would not be treated as a witness statement. It would be treated as a threat to the story they were trying to sell. "Earlier," I lied. "In the morning." I turned and walked away before he could ask for my name. I felt eyes on my back the entire way to the garage. When I got back to my apartment building, the paranoia had set in like a fever. I lived in a secure complex in Shadyside, the kind with key fobs and cameras in the lobby. It was supposed to be safe, but as I walked down the hallway to my unit, the air felt wrong. I stopped in front of my door. I had locked it. I always locked it. The deadbolt was still engaged, but the welcome mat was crooked. It was a small thing, a trivial thing, but I was a creature of habit. I always aligned the edge of the mat with the grout line of the tiles. Now, it was shifted 2 inches to the left, skewed at a slight angle. Someone had stood there, shuffling their feet, working on the lock, or perhaps they had kicked it on their way out. I pulled my keys out, lacing them through my fingers like brass knuckles. I unlocked the door and pushed it open, staying in the hallway. "Hello," I called out. Silence. I stepped inside. The apartment looked exactly as I had left it. My mail was on the counter. The throw blanket was draped over the sofa, but the smell hit me instantly. It was faint, masked by my lavender air freshener. But it was there. Stale tobacco smoke. Not the expensive cigars my father used to smoke, and not the vape pens Bryce used when he thought no one was looking. This was cheap, acrid cigarette smoke, the kind that clings to clothes and fingers. I do not smoke. No one who had a key to my apartment smoked. I moved through the rooms, checking the closets, the shower, under the bed. The place was empty. Nothing seemed to be missing. My laptop was still on the desk. My jewelry box was untouched. They had not come to steal. They had come to search, or to plant something. My phone rang. I jumped, nearly dropping it. The screen showed unknown caller. I stared at it for 3 rings. Then I swiped to answer. "Who is this?" I demanded. Silence. I could hear breathing on the other end. Slow, rhythmic breathing. Then, a single click. The line went dead. They were checking to see if I was home. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a steak knife from the block. It was a ridiculous defense, but the weight of the handle made me feel slightly less helpless. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled the pieces of Elliot's pen out of my pocket. The silver key glinted under the kitchen lights. I examined the small scrap of yellow paper again. R317. It was a unit number, but for what? I went to the living room and dragged out the heavy plastic bin I had brought home from Dad's house the day after he died. It was filled with his office overflow receipts, tax documents from 5 years ago, junk he had not bothered to shred. I had not had the heart to go through it yet. I upended the bin onto the floor. I spent the next 2 hours sifting through credit card statements and bank records. My eyes burned. My back ached. But finally, I found it. A bank statement from 3 years ago. A recurring monthly payment of $140. The payee was Iron City Secure Storage. I checked the next month. There it was again. And the next, I pulled up his digital banking records on my laptop. Guessing his password on the second try, it was the name of his first golden retriever. The payments continued right up until last month. Iron City Secure Storage was a facility down in the Strip District, right near the Allegheny River. It was a bleak, industrial area that flooded every spring. Why would my father, a man who had a climate-controlled attic and a 3-car garage, need a storage unit in a flood zone? And why pay for it out of a personal account that my mother did not have access to? I picked up my phone again. I needed to know. I needed to gauge the enemy. I dialed Bryce. He answered on the second ring. "Abigail," he said. His voice was devoid of surprise. "Is that a threat?" "It is a forecast," he said. The line went dead. I looked at the phone, my hand shaking. He had not denied being there. He had not denied the danger. He had confirmed it. I looked at the key on the table. R317. If Bryce knew about Elliot, did he know about the storage unit? Elliot had given me the key because he knew he was going to die. He had hidden it in the pen. That meant whatever was in that unit was the reason Elliot was dead. It was the leverage. It was the truth. I could not wait. If I waited until morning, it might be gone. If I waited, I might be gone. I grabbed my coat and the knife. I put the key in my bra, tight against my skin. I left the apartment, taking the back stairs instead of the elevator, and exited through the service door in the basement. The rain had turned into a mist that coated the windshield of my car. I drove to the Strip District, taking a circuitous route, checking my mirrors every 10 seconds. I did not see the black SUV this time, but I felt it. I felt the eyes of the city on me. Iron City Secure Storage was a fortress of corrugated metal and barbed wire sitting in the shadow of the Veterans Bridge. The gate code pad was rusted, but it still worked. I punched in a generic code I knew from a previous investigation, 1234 star. The gate rattled open. Security was a joke here. That was probably the point. I drove slowly down the rows of orange doors. The facility was deserted. The only sound was the hum of the highway overhead and the crunch of gravel under my tires. Row R was near the back, facing the river. I parked the car and killed the headlights. I sat in the dark for a moment, listening. Nothing, just the wind coming off the water. I got out, holding a flashlight in one hand and the knife in the other. Unit R315, Unit R316. I stopped. Unit R317. The door was not closed. The latch had been sheared off. The metal was twisted and bright where the bolt cutters had bitten through it. The door was rolled up about 2 feet from the ground. I felt a scream trapped in my chest. I was too late. Of course I was too late. Bryce had been steps ahead of me the whole time. I dropped to my knees and shone the flashlight under the door. The unit was small, maybe 5 feet by 5 feet. It was completely empty. Dust motes danced in the beam of light. There were rectangular clean spots on the floor where boxes had once sat. Someone had cleared it out. They had taken everything. I slumped against the cold metal of the door. Defeat washing over me. They had won. Whatever Dad had hidden, whatever Elliot had died to protect, it was gone. I moved the flashlight beam across the floor one last time, ready to leave. Then, the light caught something. In the far back corner, wedged into the gap between the concrete floor and the metal wall, there was a small object. It was black on black, almost invisible. I crawled into the unit, the concrete scraping my knees. I reached out and pried it loose. It was a memory card, an SD card, the kind used in cameras. It was wrapped tightly in black electrical tape, as if to waterproof it, or perhaps to hide it. It looked like it had been taped to the underside of a shelf or a box, and had fallen off when the contents were hastily removed. I held it in my palm. It was small, light, and unassuming. But as I closed my fist around it, I knew. This was it. This was the one thing they had missed. This was the needle in the haystack. that the cleaners had overlooked in their rush to erase my father's existence. I scrambled backward out of the unit, clutching the card to my chest. I ran back to my car, the gravel slipping under my boots. I had the truth. Now I just had to survive long enough to see it. The knock on my door came at 9 o'clock the next morning. It was a rhythmic, cheerful rapping that felt entirely out of place in a world that had effectively ended 48 hours ago. I was sitting at my kitchen island, staring at a blank spot on the wall. The SD card I had retrieved from the storage unit the night before was no longer in my bra. It was taped securely to the underside of the granite countertop, right beneath where my hands were resting. I could feel the phantom weight of it, a tiny square of plastic that I was certain contained the radioactive core of my father's life. I had not slept. My eyes felt like they were filled with sand, and every shadow in my apartment looked like a man in a dark suit waiting to strike. I walked to the door and checked the peephole. The fisheye lens distorted the face on the other side, but there was no mistaking the person standing there. It was Bryce. He was not wearing the severe black suit from yesterday. He was dressed in a soft cashmere sweater and jeans, holding a brown paper bag that was grease-stained at the bottom. He looked like the Bryce of 5 years ago, the little brother who used to crash on my couch when he had a fight with a girlfriend, bringing takeout as a peace offering. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door, leaving the chain engaged for a second before realizing how paranoid that looked. I undid the chain and swung the door wide. "Peace offering," Bryce said, lifting the bag. The smell wafted out fried chicken and heavy, buttery biscuits. It was from Mama Lena's, a hole-in-the-wall diner we used to go to every Sunday after church when Mom was too tired to cook. "I thought you might be hungry," he added. A sheepish smile plastered on his face. "I know I am. I have not eaten since before the service." He was good. If I had not seen him standing in the lobby of a dead man's office building, if I had not heard the cold menace in his voice on the phone last night, I would have let him hug me. I would have cried on his shoulder. "Come in," I said. My voice sounded flat, exhausted. That part was not acting. Bryce stepped inside, kicking off his shoes by the mat. He walked straight to the kitchen, taking ownership of the space the way he always did. He started unpacking the food, pulling out styrofoam containers and plastic cutlery. "I tried calling you this morning," he said, not looking at me. "You did not pick up." "I had my phone off," I lied. "I needed quiet." "I get it," he said. He popped the lid off a container of coleslaw. "It has been a hell of a couple of days. Abby, I am sorry about yesterday. On the phone. I was stressed. I did not mean to snap at you." I leaned against the counter, crossing my arms. My fingers were inches away from where the SD card was taped. He looked up, his eyes locking onto mine. "Elliot, did he call you? Or send you anything before the fire?" The question was casual, wrapped in the guise of brotherly conversation, but I could hear the tension humming underneath it. He was fishing. He was desperate. I let my shoulders slump. I rubbed my face with my hands, feigning a breakdown. "I do not know, Bryce," I mumbled. "I barely remember yesterday. I was at the grave. Then I came home. Then I watched the news and saw the building burn down. I have not received anything. What would he send me?" Bryce studied me. He was looking for a tell. He was looking for the sharp, analytical sister who investigated fraud for a living. Instead, I gave him the grieving daughter who was drowning in sorrow. "Nothing," he said, relaxing slightly. "Just paperwork, boring legal stuff. Honestly, it is better that it is gone. It simplifies things." He pushed a plate of food toward me. "Eat, please, for me." I sat down and picked at a biscuit. It tasted like ash in my mouth. "So," Bryce said, taking a bite of chicken, "since Elliot is gone, and the files are unavailable, we need to figure out the estate ourselves. I have been thinking." "Thinking about what?" "The company," he said. "Three Rivers Hauling and Freight. Dad's pride and joy." "What about it?" "It is a logistical nightmare. Abby, trucks, unions, contracts. It is bleeding money. You have your career at North River. You do not want the headache of running a trucking fleet. You do not have the time. He wiped his mouth with a napkin, his movements precise. I am willing to take it on, he said. All of it. I will take the company, the debts, the liabilities. You take the cash assets, the house, the stocks. We keep the lawyers out of it. We sign a private agreement, a family arrangement. I looked at him. He was asking me to sign over the very thing I had seen in the ledger, the company that was laundering money, the company with the ghost shipments. He wanted to bury the evidence under his own name. You want the company? I asked, my voice trembling. Bryce, that place killed Dad. The stress of it. I know, he said, reaching across the table to squeeze my hand. His skin was warm, but his touch made my skin crawl. That is why I am doing this, to save you the burden. I am the son. It is my responsibility. I slowly withdrew my hand. I reached into the pocket of my cardigan, ostensibly to find a tissue. My fingers brushed against my phone. I pressed the volume down button and the side button simultaneously, the shortcut I had programmed to start the voice recorder. Okay, I said softly. I do not care about the trucks. I do not care about the business. If you want it, take it. Just leave me out of it. Bryce exhaled, a long, audible sigh of relief. The tension in his shoulders evaporated. He thought he had won. He thought I was the stupid, emotional big sister who just wanted to mourn in peace. That is smart, Abby, he said. That is really smart. We can type something up today. I will get a notary to come here. We do not even have to leave the apartment. He stood up and began pacing the small kitchen, his energy spiking. He was manic now, fueled by the adrenaline of a successful con. We just need to make sure everything is clean, he muttered, almost to himself. Clean slate, new ownership, no trailing documents. He stopped near the refrigerator. He was looking at the magnets photos of us as kids, a postcard from Dad's trip to Maine. We just need to make sure that memory card disappears, he said. The words hung in the air. That memory card. He froze. I saw his back stiffen. He realized what he had said the moment the words left his lips. He had mentioned a specific object, an object I had never spoken about. An object that had been the only thing left in an empty storage unit. I sat very still. I did not breathe. Bryce turned around slowly. His face was no longer the face of my brother. The soft, concerned look was gone. In its place was a look of pure, predatory calculation. What memory card? I asked. My voice was a whisper, but in the silence of the kitchen, it sounded like a shout. Bryce stared at me. His eyes darted to my hands, then to the counter, then to my pocket. He was assessing the threat level. I did not say memory card, he said. I said memories. I said we need to let the bad memories disappear. No, I said. Standing up, my legs felt weak, but I forced them to hold me. You said memory card. Why would you say that? Bryce, is there a memory card? Was there one in the storage unit, the one you cleared out? He took a step toward me. I do not know what you are talking about, he said. His voice was low, dangerous. You are hearing things. Abby, you are tired. You are hysterical. I am not hysterical, I said, backing away until my hips hit the counter. I was standing right over the hidden card. I am listening, and you are slipping. Bryce stopped. He took a deep breath through his nose. He adjusted his cuffs, smoothing the expensive cashmere. When he looked up again, his eyes were dead. Do not make this worse than it has to be, he said. I am trying to help you. I am trying to save you. But if you keep picking at the scab, you are going to bleed out. Do you understand me? Is that a threat? I asked again. It is reality, he said. There are people involved here who do not care that you are my sister. They do not care about family. They only care about exposure. If you have something, if you found something, you need to give it to me. Now. I have nothing, I said. You took everything, didn't you? He studied me for a long moment. He was weighing my words, trying to decide if I was a good liar or just a confused victim. Finally, He seemed to decide that I was not worth the risk of a physical confrontation. Not here, not yet. Fine, he said. Have it your way. But when the notary comes, you sign the papers, you sign over the company, and then you walk away, if you do not. He left the sentence unfinished. It was more terrifying that way. He walked to the door. He put his hand on the knob, then paused. He did not look back at me. Instead, he tilted his head back and looked up at the corner of the ceiling, where the crown molding met the wall. He stared at the empty space for 5 seconds, his eyes scanning as if searching for a camera lens, or perhaps checking to see if the invisible audience he performed for was watching. "I will be back at noon," he said. The door clicked shut behind him. I waited until I heard the elevator ding in the hallway. Then I collapsed onto the floor, my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. I pulled the tape off the bottom of the counter. The SD card fell into my hand. I did not wait for noon. I did not wait for the notary. I ran to my bedroom and grabbed my personal laptop. I did not trust the Wi-Fi, so I disabled the internet adapter. I pulled the shades down. I sat in the corner of the room, furthest from the windows, and inserted the card into the slot. A folder popped up on the screen. It was not encrypted. There were no complex passwords. It was just a single file, a video file. The timestamp was from 2 weeks ago, 3 days before Dad went into the hospital. I clicked play. The video opened. The quality was grainy, shot from a webcam or a phone propped up on a desk. The background was Dad's study at home. The bookshelves were familiar. The leather chair was familiar. And there was my father. Thomas Price looked terrible. His skin was gray, his eyes sunken. He was wearing his favorite cardigan, the one with the suede patches on the elbows. He was holding a glass of amber liquid, his hand trembling so much the ice clinked against the glass. He looked straight into the camera. He looked straight at me. "Abigail," he said. His voice was raspy, broken. "If you are watching this, then Elliot is dead, and I am dead. And God help us. Bryce is probably the one who buried us." I covered my mouth with my hand to stifle a sob. "I do not have much time," Dad said. "They changed my medication today. I can feel it. My heart is racing like a trapped bird. I know what they are doing. I know I will not wake up." He took a sip of the drink, grimacing. "I wanted to leave you money, Abby. I wanted to leave you a legacy. But all I have left to leave you is the truth, and it is going to hurt. It is going to hurt more than the funeral." He leaned closer to the lens. His eyes were wet. The company, the hauling business, it was never just about moving freight. It was a shell, a pipeline. We moved things that were not on the manifest. We moved money that did not exist. I tried to stop it. I tried to get out. That is why they are killing me. He paused, looking off camera, as if he heard a noise in the hallway. "But that is not the secret, Abby. That is just the crime. The secret is about you." My breath hitched. "You have always been the smart one," he said. "The one who seeks the truth. But there is a truth I hid from you your entire life. I hid it to protect you. I hid it because I was a coward." He took a deep breath, tears spilling over his cheeks. "Abigail, I am not the only one who has lied to you. Your whole life, your name, who you think you are." He choked back a sob. "The man you call your brother, he is not just my son. And the people who are coming for you, they are not strangers." The video flickered. Dad looked terrified. "Remember the blue heron," he whispered. "Go to the bank, open the box, and forgive me." The screen went black. I sat there in the darkness of my bedroom, the silence ringing in my ears. I was frozen. I felt like the floor had dissolved beneath me. "I am not the only one who has lied to you. It was not about the money. It was not about the trucks. It was about me. It was about my name." I looked at the black screen, seeing my own reflection staring back, a reflection I no longer recognized. The video on my laptop screen ended, but the silence it left behind was louder than any scream. My father's face, frozen in the last frame of the recording, looked like a ghost haunting his own study. I sat in the corner of my bedroom, the curtains drawn against the relentless Pittsburgh morning, feeling the blood drain from my extremities. Remember the blue heron? It was not just a bird, it was a memory. It was the summer I turned 12, the only summer Dad took just me camping, leaving Bryce and Mom behind. We had gone to a cabin near Lake Erie. One morning, in the mist, we stood perfectly still for 20 minutes watching a great blue heron hunt in the shallows. Dad had whispered to me then that patience was the only weapon that never ran out of ammunition. He had made me promise to remember that moment. I had thought he meant the beauty of nature. Now I knew he meant the safety of a vault. I shut the laptop. I did not cry. I was past the point of tears. The sensation in my chest was cold and hard, like iron cooling in a mold. I grabbed my coat, shoved the SD card into the hidden lining of my purse, and walked out the door. I had a destination. The Liberty Commonwealth Bank was a fortress of limestone and granite on 4th Avenue, a relic from the steel boom days when money was heavy and tangible. I walked into the lobby, the smell of marble polish and old currency hitting me. I requested access to box number 409. The bank manager, a woman with hair sprayed into a helmet of gray steel, asked for the key. I produced the small silver key I had extracted from the hollow pen Elliot had given me. She nodded, but she did not move to the gate. "I need the verbal authentication phrase for the account holder's proxy," she said, her fingers hovering over a silent alarm button under the desk. "Blue heron," I said. My voice was steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. She typed it into her terminal. The screen flashed green. She stood up, her demeanor softening by a fraction of a degree. "Follow me, Ms. Price." We walked into the vault. It was a room where sound went to die, lined from floor to ceiling with stainless steel drawers. She unlocked the box with her master key, and I turned my key in the second lock. She slid the long metal drawer out and carried it to a private viewing room. "Take as much time as you need," she said, closing the door behind her. I sat at the wooden table. The box was heavy. I lifted the lid. There was no money inside. There were no diamonds or gold bars. There was just paper, a stack of documents yellowed with age, and a black leather-bound ledger that looked like it had been handled by greasy fingers. I picked up the document on top. It was a birth certificate. I read the name, then I read it again. Abigail Marie Miller, date of birth, October 12th, 1989. I stared at the paper. My birthday was October 12th, but my name was Abigail Price. I had always been Abigail Price. I looked at the next document. It was a decree of adoption, dated 3 years later. Petitioner Thomas Price, adoptee Abigail Marie Miller. The room spun. I gripped the edge of the table to keep from falling off the chair. I was 3 years old when I became a Price. I had no memory of being a Miller. I had no memory of a life before the big house in Shadyside, before Bryce, before the trucking company. My father had rewritten my history. He had erased my origin. Why I turned the page. There was a handwritten letter from Dad. The ink faded. "My dearest Abby," it began. "If you are reading this, I failed. I took you in because I wanted to save you from the world you were born into. But blood is a difficult stain to wash out. I thought I could buy our way into safety. I was wrong. If Elliot is dead, it means the cleaning has begun. It means they are erasing the witnesses. You are not just a witness. Abby, you are the evidence." I put the letter down. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely turn the page to the ledger. This was the forensic evidence. This was the smoking gun. It was a transaction log for Three Rivers Hauling. But it was not the official one filed with the IRS. This was the shadow book. I recognized the format immediately from my years of fraud investigation. Column A was the legitimate cargo steel, timber, coal. Column B was the ghost weight. I ran my finger down the rows. November 4th, shipment 209, Manifest Industrial Piping. Ghost weight, 400 pounds. Destination, Port of Baltimore. 400 pounds of what drugs? Cash weapons. The amounts in the payout column were staggering. $50,000, $120,000, $200,000, but it was the signature column that stopped my heart. Every illicit entry was initialed. 2 letters, scrawled in a sharp, aggressive hand. B.K. I stared at the letters. B.K. My first thought was Bryce, my brother. His middle name was Kevin, Bryce Kevin Price, but Bryce never used his middle name, and the handwriting I pulled a tax form of Bryce's out of my memory, visualizing his signature. Bryce wrote in loopy, lazy cursive. This handwriting was jagged, precise, almost architectural. And the dates. I looked back at the ledger. The first entry with the initials, B.K., was dated 20 years ago. Bryce would have been 10 years old. It was not Bryce. A cold realization washed over me. I had assumed Bryce was the villain. I had assumed my spoiled, desperate brother was the one pulling the strings, killing Elliot, burning the office. But Bryce was a child when this started. He was just a pawn. There was someone else, a third player, a specific person with the initials B.K., who had been using my father's company for 2 decades to move illegal shipments across the country. Someone powerful enough to terrify my father into silence. Someone who had been standing in the shadows of my childhood, invisible but controlling everything. I flipped to the back of the ledger. Tucked into the rear pocket was a folded piece of paper. It was a photocopy of a medical invoice from the pharmacy that supplied Dad's heart medication. I smoothed it out. It was dated 1 week ago. Prescription digoxin. I froze. Digoxin is a powerful heart medication. It has a very narrow therapeutic index. A slight overdose causes cardiac arrest that looks exactly like a natural heart attack. The prescribed dose on the official label was 125 micrograms, but on this invoice, the dispensed dose was listed as 500 micrograms, 4 times the lethal limit for a man in Dad's condition. And at the bottom of the invoice, authorizing the change, was a signature, not a doctor's signature. It was an authorization for emergency refill adjustment, signed by the patient's proxy. The signature was forged. It was a crude attempt to look like my father's handwriting, but the pressure points were wrong. The pen had hesitated on the loops, but right next to the pharmacy stamp, there was a small notation in the corner, likely made by the pharmacist. Authorized by BMIK, per phone confirm, BMK, killed my father. Bryce was involved. Yes, he was the one who kept me away. He was the one trying to get the company now, but he was not the architect. He was just the heir to the corruption. B.K. was the executioner. I gathered the papers. I could not leave them here. If they could burn down a law office, they could break into a bank vault. I shoved the ledger, the birth certificate, and the medical invoice into my bag. I felt the weight of them against my hip. It felt heavier than the gun I did not carry. I walked out of the viewing room. The manager was waiting. I gave her a curt nod, my face a mask of indifference. I walked through the marble lobby, my heels clicking a rhythm that sounded like a countdown. I pushed through the revolving doors and stepped out onto the sidewalk. The rain had stopped, but the sky was a bruised purple, heavy with unfallen storms. The street noise of Pittsburgh, the buses, the horns, the jackhammers seemed muted, as if I were underwater. I turned right, heading toward the parking garage. A black SUV was parked directly in front of the bank, in the no parking zone. It was the same make and model as the one that had followed me yesterday. The engine was idling, a low, menacing rumble that vibrated in my chest. I stopped. I was 10 feet away from it. The rear window slowly rolled down. I expected to see a gun. I expected to see Bryce's pale, panicked face. Instead, I saw a man I did not know. He was in his late 50s, perhaps early 60s. He had silver hair cut close to his scalp, and a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my annual salary. He held a lit cigar in one hand, the smoke curling up into the gray air. He looked comfortable. He looked like a man who owned the street, the bank, and the air I was breathing. He turned his head and looked at me. His eyes were dark, intelligent, and utterly devoid of empathy. He smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a predator who has finally cornered its prey and wants to enjoy the moment before the kill. He raised the cigar slightly in a mock salute. "Hello, Abigail," he said. His voice was deep, gravelly, and terrifyingly calm. "You look just like your mother, the real one." My blood turned to ice. He knew. He knew about the birth certificate. He knew about the name change. "Who are you?" I asked. My voice was steady, but my hand was gripping the strap of my bag so hard my fingers hurt. "Just an old friend of the family," he said. "We have a lot to catch up on. Get in." "No," I said. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "That was not a request, Abigail. It was an invitation to stay alive for another 24 hours. He tapped the ash from his cigar out the window. "Your brother Bryce is a disappointment," the man said. "He lacks vision, but you have your father's tenacity. I admire that. It would be a shame to waste it." I looked around. The street was crowded with people rushing to lunch. If I screamed, would anyone help, or would this man simply shoot me and drive away before anyone realized I was dead? "I know what you did," I said. I know about the medicine." The man's smile widened. "Of course you do. That is why I am here. We need to negotiate the terms of your surrender, or your silence, whichever comes cheaper." He unlocked the door. The sound was a loud thunk that echoed in the space between us. "Get in," he repeated. I took a step back. "Go to hell." I turned and ran. I did not run toward my car. I ran into the crowd, weaving between businessmen and shoppers, using them as human shields. I expected to hear a gunshot. I expected to hear tires squealing. But when I glanced back over my shoulder, the SUV had not moved. The man was still watching me through the open window, the cigar smoke haloing his head. He was not chasing me. He did not have to chase me. He knew exactly who I was. He knew exactly where I lived. And now I knew that the monster under my bed was real. His initials were Bainai K, and he had just told me that my entire life was a lie, built on a foundation of stolen names and murdered men. I ran until my lungs burned. I ran until the imposing limestone facade of the bank was just a gray smudge in the distance, lost in the chaotic tapestry of downtown Pittsburgh. I did not stop until I was safely inside my car. Doors locked, engine roaring, merging onto the Parkway East with a recklessness that would have normally terrified me. My hands were shaking so violently I could barely grip the steering wheel. The face of the man in the SUV, the man with the granite jaw and the predatory smile, was burned into my retinas. Bennett Klein, BAK, the man who had turned my father into a ghost before he was even dead. I needed to disappear. I needed to go somewhere where the eyes of the city couldn't find me. But before I could decide on a route, my phone rang. It was not a local number. The screen displayed a long string of digits, a country code I recognized from the postcards my parents used to send during their anniversary trips. France. I stared at it. My mother, Diane Price, was supposed to be in Paris. She had flown out 2 days before Dad died, claiming she needed space. A lie that now felt as thin as paper, I answered, putting the phone on speaker, keeping my eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "Hello, Abby?" The voice was familiar, but stripped of all its usual polish. It was jagged, breathless. "Mom," I asked. "Mom, where are you? I found the papers. I know about—" "Stop," she hissed. "Do not speak. Just listen. I am in Pittsburgh." I nearly swerved into the next lane. "You are here. Why weren't you at the—" I said, "Listen." Her voice cracked, a sound of pure desperation. "I need to see you, right now. But you have to be careful. You have to come alone. And Abigail, do not tell Bryce. If you tell Bryce, we are both dead." The echo was deafening. Do not tell Bryce. First Elliot, now Mom. The brother I had grown up with, the boy whose scraped knees I had bandaged, was now the one person everyone agreed would be the death of us. "Where?" I asked. "The Bluebird Diner, on Sawmill Run. The back booth, 20 minutes. The line went dead. I knew the place. It was a greasy spoon on the south side of the city, a place where truck drivers and insomniacs went to hide. It was the last place I would ever expect to see Diane Price. a woman who considered a scuffed heel a personal tragedy. I arrived in 18 minutes. I parked in the rear lot, hidden behind a dumpster overflowing with wet cardboard. I checked for the black SUV. Nothing, just rain and gray asphalt. Inside, the diner smelled of old fryer oil and floor wax. It was empty save for a cook scraping a griddle and a figure huddled in the farthest booth, wearing a trench coat and a silk headscarf that looked ludicrously out of place. I slid into the booth opposite her. My mother looked like she had aged 20 years in 2 weeks. Her skin, usually tightened and smoothed by the best dermatologists in the city, hung loose and gray. Her eyes were rimmed with dark, bruised circles. Her manicured hands were clutching a coffee mug so hard her knuckles were white. "Mom," I whispered. She looked up. Her eyes were terrified. She scanned the diner, checking the windows, checking the cook. "Did anyone follow you?" she whispered. "I don't think so. Mom, what is going on? I met a man. He said—" "I know," she interrupted. She reached into her oversized tote bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. She slid it across the sticky table toward me. "I know who you met." I opened the folder. It was a chaotic mess of emails, bank statements, and contracts, but as I flipped through them, one name kept jumping out at me, stamped like a brand on every page. Bennett Klein, Klein Holdings, BK, Logistics, Bennett Klein, I said, looking at her. "He is the man in the SUV. He is B.K. He was your father's partner," my mother said, her voice trembling. "Silent partner. They started the business together 30 years ago. Bennett put up the capital. Thomas put up the sweat. Bennett wanted to stay in the shadows because of where his money came from." "Drugs?" I asked. "Everything," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "He is a broker. He moves things. That is all I knew. That is all Thomas wanted me to know." She pointed to a photograph clipped to a printed email. It was an old picture, taken at a barbecue in our backyard. I recognized the setting, the old patio furniture we had in the 90s. There was Dad, laughing, holding a beer, and next to him, with an arm draped over a young Bryce's shoulders, was Bennett Klein. He looked younger, his hair black instead of silver, but the eyes were the same, cold, dead. "Bryce called him Uncle Ben," Mom whispered. "He was always around when you were at camp. He bought Bryce his first car. He paid for Bryce's college tuition when the business was tight." I felt sick. "Bryce knows he knows who this man is. Bryce worships him," she said. "To Bryce, Bennett is the strong father figure Thomas never was. Thomas was weak. Thomas wanted to follow the rules. Bennett gets things done." She reached out and turned over a page in the folder. It was a legal document, a loan authorization for the company, dated 6 months ago. "Look at the signature," she said. I looked. Diane Price. "I signed it," she choked out, tears welling in her eyes. Thomas was in the hospital for the first round of tests. He was too weak to handle the paperwork. Bennett came to the house. He told me the company was going under. He told me the employees would lose their pensions if we did not secure this bridge loan. He said it was just a formality. She grabbed my hand, her fingers ice cold. "I thought I was saving the legacy. Abigail. I thought I was being a good wife, but I wasn't signing a loan. I was signing off on a money laundering expansion. I made it legal. I gave them the keys to the accounts." "Mom," I said, pulling my hand away, "you facilitated this." "I didn't know," she cried, a jagged sob escaping her throat. "I am just a housewife. Abigail, I don't look at the ledgers. I trusted him. I trusted Uncle Ben." "And Elliot?" I asked. "Did Elliot know?" "Elliot found out," she said. She wiped her eyes with a napkin. "He called me 3 days ago, right before the fire. He was panicked. He said he found the second set of books. He said he was going to the police." "Why didn't he—" "Because he called the precinct first," Mom said. "He wanted to talk to a detective he knew, but when he called, the person who answered the private line was Bennett Klein. The air in the diner seemed to drop 10 degrees. 'They have people inside,' Mom whispered. Local police, judges, Bennett owns half the city council. That is why Elliot called me. He said, Diane, run. They are coming to clean house. She reached into her bag again. He sent this to me, she said. By courier. It arrived at the hotel in Paris yesterday morning. I flew back immediately. She placed a small white envelope on the table. It looked like it had been through a war. The edges were singed. There was a dark, greasy smudge right across the seal, a fingerprint made of charcoal dust. Your father gave this to Elliot weeks ago, she said. He told Elliot to mail it to me only if he died, and he told me to give it to you only when you were ready to suffer. I stared at the charcoal fingerprint. It was a message from the grave, passed through fire. I picked it up. The paper felt brittle. I tore open the seal. Inside was a single index card. On it, in Dad's handwriting, was a string of numbers, a passcode, perhaps, and below it, a single sentence written in block letters. The man standing next to Bryce at the funeral was not Bryce. I frowned, reading it again, the man standing next to Bryce, but Bryce wasn't at the funeral. I don't understand, I said. Bryce wasn't there. I was alone. Look at the back, Mom said. I flipped the card over. It was a photograph, a digital printout, grainy and zoomed in. It was a picture taken from a distance, likely surveillance footage. It showed the funeral service. It showed me, standing by the grave, head bowed, and standing in the background, half hidden by a large oak tree, was a figure. I squinted. It was Bryce. He had been there. He was watching from the shadows. But he wasn't alone. Standing right next to him, with a hand gripping Bryce's neck not in comfort, but in control, like a handler holding a dog, was a man. I recognized the coat. I recognized the posture. It was the man I had shaken hands with. My mind flashed back to the funeral. Before the service started, a man had approached me. He was nondescript, wearing a gray raincoat. He had shaken my hand, his grip firm and dry. My condolences, Ms. Price. Your father was a complicated man. I had assumed he was a vendor, a client. I looked at the photo again. The man holding Bryce by the neck was the same man in the gray raincoat. And then I looked closer at his face in the photo. It was Bennett Klein, without the expensive suit, without the cigar, wearing a generic coat and a hat. He had been there. He had touched me. He had stood 10 feet away while I buried my father. He was there, I whispered, dropping the card. He was at the funeral. I shook his hand. He likes to watch, Mom said. Her voice was hollow. He likes to see the pain he causes. This note, I said, pointing to the text. The man standing next to Bryce was not Bryce. What does that mean? It means, Mom said, that the boy you saw in the office, the boy who came to your apartment, that is not your brother anymore. He belongs to Bennett now. Bennett has groomed him. He has molded him. The Bryce you knew died with your father. I sat back, the horror of it settling into my bones. My brother wasn't just a traitor. He was a creation, a puppet carved out of my father's neglect and Bennett's ambition. I looked at my mother. She was shaking uncontrollably now. Why are you giving me this? I asked. If Bennett owns the police, if he killed Elliot, why give me the evidence? Why not burn it and run? Diane Price looked at me. For the first time, I saw a flicker of the steel that she must have possessed to survive living with a man like Thomas Price for 40 years. Because I am tired of being afraid, she said. And because I owe you. I stole your name, Abigail. I owe you the truth. You need to leave, I said. Go back to Europe. Go somewhere they can't find you. She shook her head slowly. Tears streamed down her face, cutting tracks through her makeup. I can't, she whispered. Why not? She reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was desperate, painful. Abigail, she sobbed. When Bennett called me when he told me to come back, he didn't just ask for a meeting. What did he say? She looked into my eyes, and I saw the reflection of my own death in them. He said that if I didn't bring this folder to you, if I didn't make sure you saw everything, he would kill you slowly. I froze. He wanted me to have this, I asked. Bennett wanted me to see the evidence. He wants you to know. Mom wept. He wants you to know exactly who he is. He wants you to know that he owns Bryce. He wants you to know that your father was a criminal. He is not afraid of you. Abigail, he is taunting you. He is daring you to try and stop him. She squeezed my wrist harder. I gave you the folder because he told me to, she confessed, her voice breaking. I sold you out, Abigail. I bought my life with yours. I left my mother weeping in the booth of the Bluebird Diner. I did not look back. There was a part of me that wanted to comfort her, to tell her that we would fix this. But the investigator in me knew that comfort was a luxury we could not afford. She had bought her life with my safety. Now, I had to ensure the price she paid was not in vain. I drove to a 24-hour internet cafe in Oakland, a place filled with students fueled by energy drinks and desperation. It was the perfect cover. I sat in a booth in the back, away from the windows, and engaged the skills that North River Integrity Group paid me a salary to use. I was done running. Running implies you are prey. I was no longer prey. I was a witness, and I was about to become a hunter. I scanned every page of the folder my mother had given me. I scanned the ledger from the bank vault. I digitized the medical invoice with the forged signature. I uploaded the video of my father's confession. Then, I began the encryption process. I used a 256-bit AES encryption standard, locking the files behind a password that was a combination of the geographic coordinates of the Blue Heron campsite and the date my father died. I did not stop there. I set up a dead man's switch. I created an automated email sequence. If I did not log in to reset the timer every 12 hours, the entire cache of evidence would be blasted to 3 recipients. One was a personal email account of a journalist at the Washington Post who had covered the Enron scandal. One was a private server belonging to Marcus Thorne, a criminal defense attorney in Chicago I had worked with on a fraud case years ago, a man who hated the government but hated bullies even more. The third went to a blind Dropbox I had set up for myself, accessible only via a secure browser. I sent a text to Marcus. Package is in the queue. If silence lasts more than 12 hours, open the attachment and burn the world down. He replied 1 minute later, Understood. Stay low. With my insurance policy in place, I made the call I had been dreading. I did not call the local police. The man who shook my hand at the funeral owned them. I called the federal field office. I asked for the Financial Crimes Task Force. I did not give my name to the operator. I simply said I had evidence of a multi-state money laundering operation involving the trucking industry and a potential homicide. They agreed to meet me, not at the office, which was too public, but at a secure satellite location in the Strip District, an unmarked brick building sandwiched between a produce wholesaler and a fish market. Agent Donnelly was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, much like Bennett Klein, but his eyes lacked the cruelty. He listened to me for 40 minutes without interrupting. I laid it all out, the ghost weight. The shell companies, the forged medical records, the arson at Elliot Crane's office. When I showed him the photo of the funeral, the one with Bennett Klein holding Bryce by the neck. Donnelly leaned forward. We know Klein, Donnelly said, his voice gravelly. We have been trying to stick a charge on him for a decade. He is slippery. He insulates himself with layers of bureaucracy and bodies. He killed my father, I said, and he killed his lawyer. We need to prove it, Donnelly said. The arson investigation was closed this morning. Official ruling was electrical failure. That is a lie, I said. We know it is likely a lie, Donnelly replied. But the fire marshal signed off on it. We looked into him. Captain Miller. He just paid off his mortgage 2 days ago. A lump sum of $150,000. I clenched my jaw. Bennett buys everyone. Not us, Donnelly said. But we have to move carefully. If we spook him, he shreds the rest of the evidence and disappears. We need to catch him in the act of moving the assets. We need him to think he has won. He thinks he has won, I said. He thinks I am terrified. He thinks my brother is going to hand him the company on a silver platter. Then let him think that, Donnelly said. Play the part. We will put a team on you. Soft surveillance, plain clothes. You won't see them, but they will be there. Do not engage Klein directly. Let us build the net. I left the safe house with a burner phone in my pocket and a plan in my head. I needed to neutralize Bryce, not by hurting him, but by exposing him. I needed to know how deep the rot went. Was he a partner, or was he just another victim I called him? Bryce, I said. My voice was trembling. A calculated performance of the scared sister. Abby, he answered immediately. He sounded relieved. Where are you? I have been worried sick. I am ready to sign, I said. You were right. I cannot handle this. The man in the SUV, he found me. I just want out. I want the money, and I want to leave Pittsburgh. Okay, Bryce said. Okay, that is good. That is the smart play. I can come to you. No, I said sharply. Not at the apartment. I do not feel safe there. I want to do it in public. There is a notary office on Liberty Avenue. Steel City Notary. Meet me there in 1 hour. Why there? Because it is next to the police station. I lied. And because I want witnesses. Fine, Bryce said. 1 hour. Bring your ID. I arrived at Steel City Notary 15 minutes early. I chose this place for a specific reason. I had used them for work before. They had high-definition security cameras covering every square inch of the lobby and the signing rooms, and they backed up their footage to an off-site cloud server instantly. I sat in the glass-walled conference room. The surveillance team Donnelly had promised was presumably outside, blending into the pedestrian traffic. Bryce walked in at 2 o'clock sharp. He was carrying a leather portfolio. He looked better than he had yesterday. The desperation was gone, replaced by a sleek, arrogant confidence. He thought the finish line was in sight. Bold choice of venue, he said, sitting down across from me. He slid a stack of documents across the table. Standard transfer of ownership. You get the liquid assets, the house, and a buyout of $2 million over 5 years. I take the company and all liabilities. I looked at the papers. It was a deal with the devil, drafted on legal stationery. Does he know you are here? I asked. Bryce paused. Who? Bennett Klein, I said. Bryce's eyes flickered to the camera in the corner of the room. He licked his lips. I told you, Abby. This is between us. Family business. Mom told me everything, Bryce, I said softly. I know about the money laundering. I know about the Uncle Ben persona. I know he owns you. Bryce's face hardened. The mask slipped. You do not know what you are talking about. Mom is confused. She is grieving. She is terrified, I corrected. Just like you. I am not terrified, Bryce snapped. I am practical. Dad was a relic. He was trying to play a game he did not understand. He got cold feet. You cannot get cold feet in this industry. Is that why he had to die? I asked. Because he got cold feet. Bryce leaned forward. His voice dropped to a hiss. He died because he was weak. He was going to ruin everything. He was going to go to the feds and trade 30 years of hard work for a plea deal. He was going to destroy our legacy. Our legacy. I laughed. A bitter sound. You mean Bennett's bank account? It is the same thing. Bryce hit the table with his fist. Bennett made us. Without him, Dad would have been driving a single dump truck until the day he died. Bennett gave us the life, the house, the private schools. We owe him. We do not owe him our lives, I said. He killed Elliot. He threatened Mom. Collateral damage, Bryce said coldly. Elliot was a liability. He was hoarding evidence. Like the memory card, I asked. Bryce went still. You said you did not have it. I lied. Bryce stared at me. For a second, I thought he was going to lunge across the table, but then he slumped back in his chair. He looked at his watch. Just sign the papers. Abby, please, if you sign, you can walk away. I can protect you. I can tell him you are out of the game. Tell who? I pressed. Tell Uncle Ben. I will tell the boss, Bryce said. The word hung in the air. The boss. Not Uncle Ben. Not Bennett. The boss. It was a total submission. He was not a partner. He was an employee, a soldier taking orders. "I will sign," I said. I picked up the pen. I signed the documents. I signed away the company. I signed away the trucks. I signed away the legacy of Thomas Price. But as I signed, I knew two things. First, the cameras were recording everything, including his admission about the boss and the collateral damage. Second, the company I was giving him was about to become a radioactive crater. While we were sitting there, Agent Donnelly's team was executing a quiet freeze on the corporate accounts. The moment Bryce filed these papers, he would be stepping onto a sinking ship. "Thank you," Bryce said, snatching the papers the moment the ink was dry. "You made the right choice." "I hope so," I said. He stood up and left without looking back. He was rushing to deliver the prize to his master. I sat there for a moment, watching him go. I felt a vibration in my pocket. It was a text from Donnelly. "Accounts frozen. Warrant signed. We are moving on the warehouse tonight." I should have felt triumphant. I had trapped them. I had the evidence. I had the feds. But as I walked back to my car, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a notification from my cloud service provider. Security alert. Multiple failed login attempts detected. I opened the app. Someone was trying to brute force my personal cloud account, the one where I kept my photos, my contacts, and the backup of the recording I had just made in the notary office. I checked the location data. The attempts were coming from an IP address in downtown Pittsburgh. I cross-referenced it with the address on the folder Mom gave me. It was the same block as Bennett Klein's holding company. They were not just waiting for me to surrender. They were actively hunting my digital footprint. They wanted to know what I knew, and they had failed the password 3 times. I got into my car. The sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the city. I needed to get to the safe house Donnelly had arranged. I drove to my apartment first. I needed clothes. I needed to grab the physical hard drive I had hidden in the vent. It was a risk, but I could not leave it. I parked down the street and walked to the building. I scanned the lobby. Empty. I took the stairs. When I reached my floor, the hallway was quiet. My door was locked, but there was something white contrasting against the dark wood of the floorboards. A piece of paper had been slid under the door. I hesitated. My hand hovered over my gun. I had taken Dad's revolver from the safe when I got the documents, though I had not told Donnelly. I reached down and picked up the paper. It was a photograph. It was a picture of me, taken today, taken at the cemetery. But I had not been to the cemetery today. I looked closer. The coat I was wearing in the photo, I had worn it yesterday. The angle was from behind, from the tree line. Whoever had taken this had been standing exactly where Bennett Klein had stood during the funeral. They had been watching me while I thought I was alone with my father's grave. I turned the photo over. There was a message scrawled in red ink. "You are digging the wrong grave." My breath caught in my throat. The lock on my door clicked. I had not put the key in. The door handle turned slowly from the inside. Someone was in my apartment, and they had been waiting for me to pick up the note. The door handle turned, the latch clicking with a sound that seemed to echo like a gunshot in the silent hallway. I raised the heavy revolver, my hands slick with sweat, pointing the barrel at the widening crack. I was ready to fire. I was ready to kill the person on the other side to keep the truth from dying with me. "Federal agents, drop the weapon." The shout was followed by a blinding beam of tactical light. I froze, blinking against the glare, my finger hovering over the trigger. "Ms. Price, it is Agent Donnelly. Lower the gun." My knees gave way. I let the revolver clatter to the floorboards as 3 figures in tactical gear swept into the apartment. They were not the hit squad I had feared. They were the cavalry, but as they ushered me out of the building, flanked by men with earpieces and assault rifles, I did not feel safe. I felt like a prisoner being transferred from one cell to another. We watched the end of the world from a safe house in Robinson Township. It was a nondescript ranch house with blackout curtains and a bank of monitors set up on the dining room table. Agent Donnelly handed me a lukewarm cup of coffee and pointed to the center screen. "It is happening," he said. The feed was live from a news helicopter hovering over the trucking depot of Three Rivers Hauling. It looked like an anthill that had been kicked over. Police cruisers with flashing blue and red lights formed a barricade around the perimeter. Men in windbreakers emblazoned with FBI and IRS were marching in and out of the main office, carrying white banker boxes stacked high. We hit the warehouse, the administrative office, and the bank simultaneously, Donnelly said, his voice devoid of triumph. The digital forensic team is already cloning the servers. We have the ledger you provided, and now we are matching it to their internal shipping manifests. I watched as a group of employees was led out, looking bewildered and terrified, and then the camera zoomed in on the side entrance. 2 agents walked out, gripping a man by his arms. It was Bryce. He was not wearing the sleek suit he had worn at the notary office. He had discarded his jacket, and his white dress shirt was rumpled, the top button torn open. His hands were cuffed behind his back. He looked small. He looked like a child playing dress-up who had suddenly realized the game was over. A reporter on the ground thrust a microphone toward him, shouting questions that were lost in the roar of the helicopter blades. Bryce looked up. For a second, he looked right into the camera lens. His face was a mask of confusion and rage. "Do you feel vindicated?" Donnelly asked me. I looked at my brother, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy who was now going to prison for crimes our father had started. "No," I said. "I feel sick." The phone in the safe house rang. Donnelly answered it, listened for a moment, and then looked at me. "We have him in processing. He is demanding to speak to you. He says he will not talk to us until he looks you in the eye." They took me to the federal building downtown. The interrogation room was cold, smelling of stale sweat and industrial cleaner. Bryce was handcuffed to the table. When I walked in, he lunged as far as the chain would allow, the metal clanking violently against the steel loop. "You set me up," he screamed. Spittle flew from his lips. "You planned this. You got me to sign the papers so you could take it all." "I did not want the company, Bryce," I said quietly, standing by the door. "I wanted it dead." "Liar," he spat. "You want the money. You want the payout. You think you are smarter than everyone. You are going to get us both killed. Bennett will not let this stand." "Bennett is next," I said. "The feds are tracking the digital signatures on the ghost contracts right now. They found the link. Bryce, the authorization codes for the illegal shipments came from a device registered to Bennett Klein." Bryce stopped struggling. He slumped back in his chair, a look of pity crossing his face. "You really do not get it, do you?" he whispered. "You think a signature on a screen matters. Bennett does not leave fingerprints. Abby, he leaves corpses, and you just handed him mine." I walked out. I could not listen to him anymore. I could not listen to the delusion that he was still a player in the game. By 6 o'clock that evening, the dominoes were falling faster than I could count them. The news was a continuous loop of the raid. Prominent Pittsburgh trucking firm raided in massive federal probe. My father's name was being dragged through the mud. My brother's mugshot was plastered on every channel. Agent Donnelly walked into the room where I was waiting. He looked grim. "We have a problem," he said. "What problem?" "You have the evidence. You have Bryce." "We moved to arrest Bennett Klein an hour ago," Donnelly said. "We had a warrant for his home and his office." "Did he run?" I asked, a spike of fear hitting my chest. "Is he gone?" "No," Donnelly said. He picked up the remote and turned on the television mounted on the wall. "He did not run. He went on the offensive." The screen showed a press conference. It was taking place on the steps of the Klein Holdings building. Dozens of microphones were clustered on a podium, and there, standing tall and grave in a black suit, was Bennett Klein. He did not look like a criminal on the run. He looked like a statesman in mourning. "I am devastated," Bennett said into the microphones, his voice rich with practiced sorrow. "Thomas Price was my oldest friend. I trusted him with my life. When he passed, I assumed his children would carry on his legacy of integrity. It breaks my heart to learn that his son, Bryce Price, has apparently been using the family business to facilitate criminal activities." I stared at the screen, my mouth open. I have been informed by the authorities that my name and digital credentials were used to authorize these illicit shipments, Bennett continued, shaking his head. It appears Bryce used his access to my system's access I granted him out of trust, to help him mentor under me, to frame me for his own greed. I will be cooperating fully with the federal investigation to clear my name and bring this young man to justice. He is framing Bryce, I whispered. He is twisting it. He is saying Bryce stole his identity. It is a classic pivot, Donnelly said, turning off the TV. He claims he was the victim of identity theft. He claims Bryce was the mastermind who used his mentor's credentials to hide the crimes, without a witness to testify that Bennett gave the direct orders. It becomes a he said, she said, and Bennett Klein has the best lawyers on the East Coast. I am the witness, I said. I have the ledger. I have the medical records. The ledger shows his initials, Donnelly argued. He will claim Bryce forged them. The medical records show a signature. He will claim it is a fake. We need something that ties him physically to the crimes. We need the murder of Elliot Crane. The mention of Elliot brought a fresh wave of nausea. The arson report, I said. You said it was electrical. We reopened it, Donnelly said. Forensics went back in this afternoon. They found traces of a chemical accelerant in the subflooring that the first team missed. It was arson, definitely. But the fire was too hot. It destroyed the server room. It destroyed the paper files. Whatever Elliot was holding for you, it is ash. There was a knock on the open door of the safe room. A young woman stood there. She looked terrified. She was clutching a purse to her chest as if it were a shield. Agent Donnelly, she asked. Her voice was barely a squeak. Yes. I am Sarah, she said. I was Elliot Crane's paralegal. I saw the news about the fire. I need to tell you something. I stood up. Did you know Elliot was in trouble? She looked at me, her eyes wide. He told me to go home early that day. He said he was expecting a dangerous client. But before I left, he gave me instructions. He said that if anything happened to him, I was to tell Abigail Price about the second will. The second will? I asked. What do you mean? Mr. Crane drafted a new will for your father 3 days before Thomas died, Sarah said. It was not in the official system. He kept it on a separate drive. He said Thomas wanted to change the beneficiary structure entirely. He wanted to cut Bryce out, and he wanted to include a statement of facts. Where is it? I demanded. Where is the drive? Sarah began to cry. It was in the envelope, the white envelope with the wax seal. He put the drive inside it. He kept it on his desk. I closed my eyes. I had seen that envelope. Elliot had tried to hide it from me. Open 1 hour after funeral. It is gone, I said, my voice hollow. It burned with him. But the existence of it matters, Donnelly said. Stepping in. If we can prove Thomas intended to cut Bryce out and expose the crime, it gives Bryce a motive for murder. But it also gives Bennett a motive to silence Thomas. It is circumstantial, I said. Bennett will just say Bryce destroyed it to keep his inheritance. We have to get you on the stand, Donnelly said. Turning to me. The grand jury convenes in 2 days. We need you to testify about the phone call from Elliot, about the threat, about the pen and the key. We need you to paint the picture of the conspiracy. I will do it, I said. Listen to me, Donnelly said, gripping my shoulder. Bennett Klein does not fight with fists unless he has to. He fights with information. If you take that stand, he is going to come for you. He is going to try to destroy your credibility. Is there anything in your past, anything at all, that he can use? I thought about the birth certificate in my bag, the secret that I was not a Price, the secret that I was an adopted daughter of a criminal empire. No, I lied. There is nothing. 2 days later, the courtroom was a circus. The press was packed into the gallery, hungry for the downfall of a Pittsburgh dynasty. Bryce was not there. This was a preliminary hearing to determine the admissibility of the evidence against Bennett Klein's assets. I sat in the witness box. I felt exposed. I felt the eyes of Bennett Klein on me. He was sitting at the defense table, looking calm, looking bored. He winked at me. Agent Donnelly's team had done a good job presenting the financial data. But Bennett's lawyer, a shark named Marcus Vane with a smile like a razor blade, had torn through it. He had painted Bryce as a drug-addicted prodigal son who had fooled everyone, including his benevolent Uncle Ben. "The prosecution calls Abigail Price," the district attorney announced. I took the oath. I sat down. "Ms. Price," the DA began, "can you tell the court about the phone call you received from Elliot Crane on the day of his death?" "He told me I was in danger," I said, my voice ringing out in the silent room. "He told me to run. He gave me a key to a storage unit where my father had hidden evidence of money laundering, evidence that implicated Bennett Klein." I pointed a trembling finger at the defense table. "Mr. Klein threatened me," I continued. "He followed me. He told me that he owned the police. He told me that my father was his partner in crime." A murmur ran through the courtroom. "Objection." Marcus Vane stood up. He did not look worried. He looked like he was about to swat a fly. "Hearsay. The witness is recounting conversations with dead men." "Sustained," the judge said. "Stick to what you saw, Ms. Price." "I saw the ledger," I said. "I saw the initials BK next to the illegal shipments." "Your Honor," Vane interrupted smoothly, "we have already established that the defendant's identity was stolen by the witness's brother, but we have a more pressing issue regarding this witness's testimony." Vane walked toward the witness stand. He was holding a document. It was not a ledger. It was an old yellowed piece of paper. My heart stopped. "Ms. Price," Vane said, "you claim to be acting in the interest of justice for your late father, Thomas Price. You claim to be the grieving daughter seeking the truth." "I am," I said. "Are you—" Vane smiled. He turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the defense moves to dismiss this witness's testimony on the grounds of extreme bias and lack of standing. We have evidence that Ms. Price is not a legal heir, nor is she a credible witness regarding the family dynamics." He held up the paper. "This is a copy of an unsealed adoption decree from 1992, Vane announced. "It reveals that the witness is not Abigail Price. She is Abigail Miller. And more importantly, her biological father was a man named David Miller, a rival trucking union leader who was a sworn enemy of Thomas Price." The courtroom erupted. The gavel banged, but I could not hear it. "The defense contends," Vane shouted over the noise, "that this entire investigation is not about justice. It is a vendetta. It is a long-con revenge plot by the daughter of a rival to destroy the Price legacy and the man who tried to save it. Mr. Bennett Klein." I sat frozen in the chair. Bennett Klein was looking at me. He wasn't smiling anymore. He was staring with cold, dead eyes that said, "I told you I would destroy you." He had taken the one thing I had left my identity and turned it into a weapon to cut my throat in open court. The courtroom smelled of floor wax, stale air, and the distinct, metallic scent of impending ruin. It was packed to capacity. Every seat in the gallery was filled with reporters, former employees of Three Rivers Hauling, and curious onlookers who treated my family's destruction like a midday matinee. I sat at the prosecution table next to Agent Donnelly and the Assistant United States Attorney, a sharp-featured woman named Harrison. I felt less like a witness and more like a specimen pinned to a board. The previous day's revelation that I was born Abigail Miller, the daughter of my father's rival, had done exactly what Marcus Vane intended. It had stripped me of my armor. The jury was no longer looking at the grieving daughter of Thomas Price. They were looking at a stranger, an imposter, a woman who might have engineered this entire spectacle out of some genetic vendetta I did not even know I carried. Bennett Klein sat at the defense table. He looked immaculate. He wore a navy suit that absorbed the light, and his demeanor was one of patient, paternal disappointment. He did not look at me. He looked at the jury, offering them small, confident nods, as if they were co-conspirators in this farce. "The prosecution calls forensic accountant David Sorrell," Harrison announced. The morning was a blur of numbers. Sorrell, a man with thick glasses and a monotone voice, walked the jury through the financial labyrinth I had uncovered in my mother's folder and the bank vault ledger. He projected spreadsheets onto the large screens. We have identified 42 separate shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands and Delaware, Sorrell testified, using a laser pointer to circle a web of names. Funds from Three Rivers Hauling were funneled into these entities as consulting fees and logistics overages. The total amount siphoned over 20 years exceeds $80 million. The jury murmured, $80 million. It was a staggering sum. And who authorized these transfers? Harrison asked. The digital keys were linked to the CEO's terminal, Sorrell said, but the authorization codes, the secondary approvals required for any amount over $50,000, those came from a remote server. And who owns that server? Mr. Sorrell. Klein Holdings, Sorrell said. Mr. Bennett Klein. It was a solid hit. I saw a muscle twitch in Bennett's jaw, but then Marcus Vane stood up for cross-examination. He moved like a dancer, light on his feet and dangerous. Mr. Sorrell, Vane said, smiling. Is it possible for a digital key to be shared? Technically, yes. Is it possible, Vane continued, that a young, ambitious protege, say, someone like Bryce Price, might have been given access to these servers by a trusting mentor, someone who wanted to teach him the business? It is possible, Sorrell admitted. And if Bryce Price had that access, Vane said, turning to the jury, he could have authorized those transfers himself, could he not? While Mr. Klein was busy running his legitimate empire, the boy he treated like a son was robbing him blind and framing him for it. Vane let the silence hang. He was good. He was terrifyingly good. Then came the character assassination. When I took the stand again for redirect, Vane did not ask about the money. He asked about the blood. Ms. Miller, he said, using my birth name with a sneer. Or do you still insist on Price? It gets confusing, does it not? Trying to keep track of which father you are betraying. Objection, Harrison shouted. Argumentative. Sustained, the judge said, looking weary. Watch yourself. Mr. Vane. My apologies, Vane said, not sounding sorry at all. Let us look at the timeline. You found out about your adoption recently. You found out your biological father was crushed by Thomas Price's business tactics in the 90s, and suddenly, you appear with a magical folder of evidence that destroys the Price legacy and implicates Mr. Klein. Is it not true that you are angry? Is it not true that you want to burn it all down? I am here for the truth, I said, my voice shaking. My father Thomas Price was murdered. So you say, Vane countered, but we only have your word, don't we? The word of a woman who has been living a lie her entire life. I looked at the jury. I saw doubt in their eyes. Vane had planted the seed, and it was blooming fast. I felt naked. My father was dead, and yet Vane was digging him up, stripping the flesh from his bones, and using his secrets to beat me into submission. Then came my mother. Diane Price looked frail as she took the oath. She wore a simple black dress, no jewelry. She gripped the railing of the witness box as if it were the rail of a sinking ship. Mrs. Price, Harrison asked gently, did you sign the loan documents authorizing the expansion of the logistics network? Yes, my mother whispered. Did you know what those loans were for? I thought they were to save the company, she said, tears spilling over. Bennett, Mr. Klein told me we were insolvent. He told me Thomas was too sick to handle it. He said if I signed, he would take care of us. And did he? He used me, she sobbed. I signed my name, and he used it to wash dirty money. I was stupid. I was scared. But I did not know people were going to die. She looked at Bennett then. For the first time, she met his gaze. I helped you, she cried out, her voice breaking. I made tea for you in my kitchen while you were planning to kill my husband. Objection, Vane roared. The witness is speculating. I am not speculating, Mom screamed. He told me. He told me to give the folder to Abigail, or he would kill her too. The courtroom erupted. The judge hammered his gavel. Demanding order, Vane looked unbothered. He knew that a hysterical woman often looked like a liar to a jury of skeptics. Then came Bryce. They brought him in through the side door. He was wearing a gray jumpsuit, not the orange one, but the shackles were the same. He looked like a ghost of the arrogant boy I had met at the notary. He looked at me, and his eyes were full of venom. "Mr. Price?" Harrison asked. "Did you kill Elliot Crane?" "No," Bryce said. His voice was raspy. "I was there. I went to get the will. But I did not set the fire." "Who did?" "I do not know," Bryce said, looking quickly at Bennett and then looking away. "But when I left, I saw a man in the stairwell, a man who works for him." He jerked his head toward the defense table. "Name?" Harrison pressed. "I do not know his name," Bryce muttered. "We just call him the cleaner." "You want a deal, don't you, Mr. Price?" Vane asked on cross-examination. "You are looking at 20 years for fraud. You would say anything to cut that down, wouldn't you? You would even blame the man who paid for your college tuition." "He owns me," Bryce shouted. "He made me do it. He told me if I did not sign the ghost contracts, he would tell Dad about the gambling debts." "So you admit you signed them?" Vane smiled. "Thank you. No further questions." It was a disaster. Bryce had admitted to the fraud. Mom had admitted to the negligence, and I had been painted as a vengeful imposter. Bennett Klein was going to walk. I could feel it. The air in the room was heavy with his victory. The prosecution moved to the arson. The fire marshal took the stand. He testified about the pore patterns in the carpet. He testified about the chemical traces of accelerant found in the subflooring. "And the security cameras?" Harrison asked. "The server logs show that the cameras on the 4th floor were manually disabled at 7:12 in the evening," the marshal said. 7 minutes before the first alarm. Who had administrative access to disable the cameras? "Only the building owner," the marshal said. "And the primary tenant." "Elliot Crane," Vane interjected from his seat. "The tenant disabled his own cameras. Perhaps he wanted to commit suicide. Perhaps he was distraught over his client's death." "Objection!" Harrison shouted. "Withdrawn." Vane smirked. It was slipping away. "We needed the kill shot. We needed the twist." "Your Honor," Harrison said, standing tall. "The prosecution wishes to introduce new evidence, Exhibit G, a digital video file recovered from a hidden SD card." Vane stood up. "Objection. We have not had time to review this. It was provided to the defense this morning." "Your Honor," Harrison said, "it is relevant to the state of mind of the deceased." The judge nodded. "Play it." The lights in the courtroom dimmed. The large screens flickered to life, and there was my father, Thomas Price. The silence in the room was absolute. Even the reporters stopped typing. "Abigail." My father's voice filled the room, raspy and broken. "If you are watching this, then Elliot is dead, and I am dead." I saw the jurors lean forward. They were seeing a dead man speak. "They changed my medication today," Dad said on the screen. "I can feel it. My heart is racing like a trapped bird. I know what they are doing." Harrison paused the video. She held up a document. "This is the medical log from the final week of Thomas Price's life," she said. "As Ms. Price discovered, the dosage of digoxin was quadrupled. This change was not authorized by a physician. It was authorized by a proxy signature." She put the forged invoice on the overhead projector. The signature was a shaky scrawl, but the stamp next to it was clear. "Authorized by Baitmo K. Per phone. Confirm." "BK," Harrison said. Bennett Klein. Vane was on his feet instantly. He looked furious, but it was a calculated fury. "This is ridiculous," he shouted. "That video could be anything. Deepfake technology is available to anyone with a smartphone. The witness, Ms. Miller, works in fraud investigation. She knows exactly how to manipulate digital media. And that invoice? It is a photocopy of a photocopy. Where is the original?" "The original was destroyed," Harrison said. Likely by the same people who burned down the law office. Likely? Vane scoffed. We are convicting men on likely now. There is no chain of custody for that video. It came from a storage unit that the witness claims to have visited alone. She had hours to plant it. She had hours to doctor it. He turned to the jury. This is a desperate attempt by a desperate woman to frame an innocent man for a natural death. Thomas Price had a bad heart. He died of a heart attack. That is a fact. This video is a theater production. The doubt crept back into the jurors' eyes. Vane was right about the chain of custody. I had been alone with the card. I had the skills to fake it. It was my word against his, and my word was already tarnished. I looked at Bennett. He was staring at me again. He mouthed one word: goodbye. I felt a cold rage settle in my stomach. He thought he had won. He thought he had silenced Elliot Crane. He thought fire destroyed everything. But he was wrong. Fire does not destroy the cloud. I leaned over to Harrison. The audio, I whispered. Play the audio. Harrison looked at me, confused. The video is done. Abigail. Not the video, I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. The call? The call from Elliot. The one I got 1 hour after the funeral. We entered the transcript, Harrison whispered back. Vane dismissed it as hearsay. Not the transcript, I said. The raw audio, the metadata. I stood up. I did not wait for permission. Your Honor, I said. My voice was loud, cutting through the murmurs. The defense claims that Elliot Crane committed suicide. The defense claims that I forged the evidence. Ms. Price, sit down, the judge warned. I have one more piece of evidence, I said, holding up my phone. This is not from a storage unit. This is from the server of the cellular provider. It is a recording of the incoming call I received at 2:14 in the afternoon on the day of the funeral. It is time-stamped, it is geotagged, and it cannot be faked. Vane looked up. For the first time, he looked unsure. Mr. Vane says Elliot Crane disabled the cameras because he wanted to die, I said, walking toward the jury box. But Elliot Crane did not want to die. He wanted to make a deal. I pressed play. I held the phone up to the microphone on the witness stand. The sound of static filled the courtroom, and then Elliot's voice, breathless, terrified. Abigail, if you want to live, come to my office. Do not tell Bryce. The jury listened. Do you remember the Blue Heron? And then, the part I had not played for Agent Donnelly until this morning. The part that came right at the end, right before the line went dead. The part that had been recovered from the background noise by the forensic audio team. There was a sound of a door slamming in the background of the recording, and Elliot screaming away from the phone. No, tell Bennett. I haven't sent it yet. Tell Bennett Klein to call off the fire. The recording ended. The silence in the courtroom was absolute. It was a vacuum. Elliot Crane had not just warned me. In his final moments of panic, believing his killers were already in the room or closing in, he had screamed the name of the man who ordered his death. Tell Bennett Klein to call off the fire. I looked at the defense table. Bennett Klein was not smiling. He was not nodding at the jury. He was frozen. His face had gone the color of ash. He looked at Marcus Vane, but the lawyer was staring down at his desk, shuffling papers, distancing himself from the blast radius. That, I said to the jury, my voice steady and cold, is not a deepfake. That is the voice of a man who knows he is about to burn. I looked at Bennett. And he just named the arsonist. The silence that followed the recording was not the silence of peace. It was the vacuum before an implosion. Elliot Crane's voice, screaming from the grave, had stripped away the last layer of Bennett Klein's armor. The name Bennett Klein hung in the air, vibrating with the terrified frequency of a dying man's last wish. Marcus Vane, the defense attorney who had looked so invincible 5 minutes ago, slowly closed his laptop. He did not look at his client. He stared at the table, calculating the damage to his own reputation, realizing that he had just been unknowingly defending a murderer in a capital case. The judge slammed the gavel down. It sounded like a gunshot. Bail is revoked, the judge barked, his face flushed with anger. Marshals, take the defendant into custody immediately pending a federal grand jury indictment for arson and homicide. Bennett Klein did not fight. He stood up slowly, smoothing the wrinkles of his suit jacket. For a brief second, he looked across the aisle at me. The arrogance was gone. The predator's smile was gone. In its place was a look of profound, icy hatred. He offered no words. He simply held out his wrists as the U.S. Marshals snapped the cuffs on him. The click of the metal locking into place was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard, but the chaos was just beginning. As they led Bennett toward the side exit, a howl erupted from the witness holding area. The door burst open, and Bryce was dragged into the hallway by two deputies. He had seen the monitor. He had heard the recording. "It was him!" Bryce screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail. He was thrashing against the guards, his eyes wide and manic. I told you, he made me do it. I am just the messenger. Bennett is the boss." He saw Bennett in cuffs, and the reality of his own position crashed down on him. The shield was gone. The Uncle Ben who had promised to protect him was being hauled away. Bryce was alone. I walked out of the courtroom and into the secure corridor. Agent Donnelly tried to stop me, but I pushed past him. I needed to look my brother in the eye. I needed to ask the question that had been burning a hole in my stomach since I found the medical invoice. The deputies held Bryce back as I approached. He looked at me, sweat pouring down his face, his nose running. He looked like a terrified child. "Abby," he sobbed. "Abby, please, you have to tell them. I did not know about the fire. I swear, I did not know he was going to burn Elliot." I stood 2 feet away from him. I did not feel pity. I did not feel love. I felt a cold, clinical detachment. "I do not care about the fire, Bryce," I said. My voice was low, steady, and sharp enough to cut glass. "I want to know about the pills." Bryce froze. His mouth hung open. "The digoxin," I said. "The invoice. It had a signature, but it was forged, and it had an authorization code. Who changed the dose? Bryce. Who put those pills in Dad's bottle?" Bryce looked at the floor. He looked at the deputies. He looked anywhere but at me. "Look at me," I screamed. The sound echoed off the tile walls, making everyone jump. Bryce's head snapped up. Tears were streaming down his cheeks. "He told me it would help," Bryce whispered. "Bennett, he said Dad was agitated. He said Dad was going to ruin everything because he was stressed. He gave me the new bottle. He said it was a sedative mix. He said, 'Just switch them out, Bryce. It will make him sleep. It will keep him calm until we fix the business.'" I stared at him, horror washing over me. "You switched them?" I asked. "You physically switched the pills?" "I thought it was to help him sleep," Bryce wailed. "I did not know it was poison. I just wanted him to stop asking questions. I just wanted him to stop looking at the ledgers." He collapsed against the deputy, his legs giving out. "I killed him," Bryce moaned into the deputy's chest. "I killed Dad because I thought I was helping the company." I turned away. I felt bile rising in my throat. My brother was not a mastermind. He was a fool. A useful idiot who had been manipulated into patricide by a man who viewed human lives as line items on a spreadsheet. We returned to the courtroom for the final phase. The atmosphere had shifted from a trial to a wake. Bennett Klein was gone, taken to federal lockup. Bryce was being held in a separate room, on suicide watch. But the prosecutor, Harrison, was not finished. She had one last box to check. She needed to destroy the narrative of Thomas Price, the victim. She needed to show the jury exactly why this had happened. "Your Honor," Harrison said, "in light of the new evidence and the defendant's apprehension, the government wishes to enter the full email correspondence recovered from the backup servers of Klein Holdings into the record. These documents establish the motive for the murder of Thomas Price." She projected an email onto the screen. It was dated 6 months ago, from Bennett Klein to a secure address. Subject, the liability. "Thomas is getting soft. He wants out. He is threatening to go to the SEC and confess to the arrangement. He thinks he can buy his soul back after 30 years. Remind him that he signed the Blood Pact in 1992. If he goes down, he takes the family with him. If he does not stay in line, activate the contingency, clean up the lawyer, check the daughter, use the son, use the son. I read the words, but my eyes drifted to the line above it. Remind him that he signed the Blood Pact in 1992. Harrison turned to the jury. Her voice was somber. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, "we have painted Thomas Price as a victim, and he was a victim of murder, but the truth is more complicated. Thomas Price was not an innocent man whose business was hijacked. For 25 years, Thomas Price knowingly used his trucking fleet to launder money for Bennett Klein." She clicked a button. A document appeared. It was an operating agreement, signed in 1995. It bore 2 signatures. Whose? Bennett Klein and Thomas Price. "He built this life on crime," Harrison said. "He adopted Abigail Miller not just to save her, but to hide the guilt of destroying her biological father. He shielded Bennett Klein for decades. He grew rich on the proceeds, and when he finally grew a conscience, when he finally tried to break the cycle, he was eliminated by the partner he had empowered." I sat in the front row, feeling the world crumble. I had spent my entire life looking up to Thomas Price. I had made him my moral compass. I had become a fraud investigator because I wanted to be like him, a man of integrity in a world of lies. But he was the lie, the house in Shadyside, the private school, the vacations, my car, my clothes, even my job. It was all fruit from a poison tree. He hadn't just protected me from the truth. He had built a wall of lies to protect himself from my judgment. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Agent Donnelly. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. I looked at the empty witness stand where my father's ghost had just been put on trial. "No," I said. "I am not okay," but I stood up. I walked to the prosecution table. I looked at the jury. I was not Abigail Price, the heiress. I was not Abigail Miller, the victim. I was just Abigail, and I was the only one left standing who had not sold her soul. The judge asked if I wanted to make a final victim impact statement before the sentencing phase began. I walked to the podium. I did not have a prepared speech. I gripped the wood, feeling the splinters under my fingers. "My father," I began, my voice trembling before finding its steel, "was a criminal. He lied to me every day of my life. He lied about who I was. He lied about who he was." I looked at the empty defense chair. But in the end, he tried to tell the truth. He was too late to save himself. He was too late to save my brother. But he left the door open for me. I took a deep breath. He was wrong to stay silent for 30 years. He was wrong to think he could protect us with money made from darkness. But I am right to speak. I am right to burn it down. The Price legacy ends today, and I am the one ending it. I stepped down. The wheels of justice moved quickly after that, with the audio recording, the confession from Bryce, and the email evidence. There was no trial for Bennett. His lawyers brokered a plea to avoid the death penalty. Bennett Klein was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. He would die in a concrete box. Stripped of his suits and his cigars, Bryce Price, in exchange for his cooperation and testimony against Bennett, received a sentence of 15 years. The judge showed leniency for the manipulation, but the fact remained he had administered the poison. He would be a middle-aged man when he walked free. I did not visit him before they took him away. I could not. 1 hour after the gavel fell, I walked out of the federal courthouse. The storm that had been threatening Pittsburgh for days had finally broken. The air was cold and clean, scrubbing the soot from the city streets. The wind whipped my coat around my legs. I stood on the steps, alone. I had no family. I had no company. I had no name that felt like my own. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the last item from the folder my mother had given me. It was a small, cream-colored envelope. Dad's handwriting was on the front. For Abigail, to be read when the dust settles. I tore it open. There was no money inside, no deed to a hidden property, just a single sheet of notepad paper, written with a shaky hand. likely in those final, terrified hours before the digoxin stopped his heart. I read the words, "My darling girl, if you are reading this, you know everything. You know I was not a hero. You know I was a weak man who made a deal with the devil to give you a heaven. I am sorry I built your foundation on sand. The truth is a terrible fire. Abigail, it will burn everything you thought you knew. It will destroy the version of me you loved. It will destroy the version of yourself you recognized. But you are stronger than me. You always were. The truth will destroy you, and then you will rebuild yourself with it. Do not be a Price. Do not be a Miller. Be the woman who survived them both. Love, Dad." I lowered the letter. The wind snatched at the paper, trying to pull it from my grip, but I held on. I looked out at the city of Pittsburgh, the bridges, the rivers, the steel towers. It was the same city I had looked at a week ago, but it looked different now. It was no longer a kingdom of secrets. It was just a place where I had lost everything, and a place where I had found the only thing that mattered, my own voice. I folded the letter and put it back in my pocket. I buttoned my coat. I walked down the steps, my heels clicking on the pavement, walking away from the courthouse, away from the past, and into a future that belonged only to me. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Abigail's journey. If you enjoyed this story, please make sure to subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help these stories reach more people. Your support means the world to us.